Hello, friends. Usually, you see me standing in my kitchen talking about nutrition, exercise, and how to live a vibrant, proud old age. You read the comments, and people say, "Oh, Peggy is so strong," or "I wish I was as decisive as she is." But today, I want to take off that armor. I want to show you a scar, the biggest, deepest scar in this 76-year-old heart. People say, regret is like a small stone you forget in your pocket. At first, it's just a little annoying. You think you can ignore it, but you keep walking. For 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, that stone doesn't get any bigger, but it gets heavier, 1,000 times heavier, until finally it drags you down to your knees and you can't breathe. And the stone in my pocket has a name, Maggie. We shared the same mother, but we were like aliens from two different planets. I was your typical type A personality. From the time I was a child, I was punctual, organized, and lived by the rules. I believed life was a math problem to be solved with discipline. My house was always immaculate, not a speck of dust. But Maggie? She was a wild wind. She was always late. Her house looked like a tornado had just passed through it. She laughed too loud. She forgot things constantly, and she never seemed to have a plan for her life. The story begins from the 80 seconds and 90 seconds. I remember every time I drove over to visit Maggie, I had a mental checklist of things I needed to fix about her. Maggie's house was always a disaster zone. Stepping through the front door was a hazard. You had to dodge sharp Lego bricks or little toy soldiers scattered across the floor. Laundry piled high on the sofa, waiting to be folded. Dishes from breakfast still sitting in the sink at 3 p.m. And there I was, crisp blouse, hair in a perfect bun, sitting on the edge of that sofa, feeling irritated. I watched her juggling a teapot and a crying toddler, laughing about some silly movie she saw. I didn't laugh. I just frowned and asked, "Maggie, for heaven's sake, why don't you clean up? How can you live in this pigsty?" The smile on her face vanished instantly. She looked around the room, embarrassed, kicking a toy under the table, and whispered, "I'm sorry, Peggy. The boys are just wild today. I haven't had time." It wasn't just the house. I judged her husband Daniel too. My husband was a successful man, steady job, money in the bank, 401k. My life was a straight line going up, safe, secure, and admirable. But Daniel, he was a sweet man. He loved his family, but his career was unstable. He was always trying something new, jumping from one job to another. In my eyes back then, Daniel was a failure, and Maggie was blind for staying with him. I gave myself the right to lecture her. Every time we met, instead of asking, "Are you happy?" I would ask, "When is Daniel going to get a real job? Why aren't you saving money?" I thought I was helping her. I thought I was being the responsible big sister, pulling her out of the mud, but I was blind. The arrogance of success blinded me. Looking back now, I see clearly what I missed back then. My house was spotless. Yes, not a speck of dust, but it was quiet. It was cold. My children were well behaved because they were afraid to make a mess. My home was like a museum, beautiful, but don't touch anything. But Maggie's house, it was a mess, sure. But in that mess, there was always laughter. Daniel might have been broke, but he was home for dinner every night. He played with his sons. Maggie's eyes sparkled when she looked at him. They had what I didn't, life. I only had control. But back then, I was too stupid to see the difference. There is one image that has haunted my sleep for the last 25 years. It is the look in Maggie's eyes at our mother's birthday dinner. I remember she held her husband's hand tightly, her face glowing. She told me with so much hope, "Peggy, we are moving to Ohio. We are going to start over. This time, Daniel is going to make it work." You know, looking back now, I realized something painful. She didn't need me to give her money. She didn't need me to analyze the financial risks. She needed only one thing from her big sister, a little bit of encouragement. She was waiting for me to say, "I believe in you." But I didn't say that. Instead, I used my so-called intelligence and realism to crush that joy instantly. I looked her right in the face and said the cruelest things a sister could say. "Don't be so stupid, Maggie. Daniel is a failure. If you follow him, you'll end up on the street. Wake up." I thought I was saving her. I thought I was the hero, the only one brave enough to speak the hard truth. But I was wrong. I wasn't a hero. I was just an arrogant woman using words like knives to cut my sister's heart open. Maggie didn't scream. She didn't fight back. She just looked at me with total disappointment. Then she stood up, grabbed her husband's hand, and walked out the door. No goodbye, no looking back. When that door closed, I had no idea that it was the last time I would ever see her alive. I told myself, "Oh, it's just a fight. She'll get over it in a few days." But a few days turned into 24 years. Can you believe that? For 24 years, I never picked up the phone. Why? Not because I didn't miss her, but because of my damned ego. Every time I reached for the phone, that little devil of pride whispered in my ear, "You weren't wrong, Harriet. You were right." She walked away. She should be the one to apologize to you. I held on to that feeling of being right like a shield. I won the argument about her husband's career, but I lost the only sister I ever had. Then the day came. About 6 years ago, my brother William called me. His voice cracked over the phone. "Harriet, it's Maggie. She has lung cancer. The doctors say she doesn't have much time. You need to come home." Any normal sister would have dropped everything and rushed to the airport, but not me. Even in that life or death moment, that demon of pride rose up again. I hesitated. I sat on the edge of my bed, fighting a war in my head for a whole night. I was afraid. I was afraid to face her. I was afraid of the shame. I was afraid she would kick me out. I kept asking myself, what will I say? I'm sorry? After 24 years? That cowardice kept me in my house for 2 more days. I used work and arrangements as an excuse, but the truth was, I was hiding. Finally, I got on a plane to Ohio. During the entire flight, I rehearsed my apology 1,000 times. I imagined a movie scene where we would hug, cry, and everything would be forgiven. But life is not a Hollywood movie. When I arrived at Maggie's house, it was terrifyingly quiet. No laughter, no children playing. Daniel opened the door. He looked so old, his eyes red and swollen. He looked at me, shook his head gently, and said, "You're too late, Peggy. She went this morning." I was 4 hours late. Just 4 hours. But really, I was late because I wasted 2 days protecting my ego. If I had left the moment I got that call, I could have held her hand one last time. I walked into the bedroom. Maggie was lying there, peaceful, as if she were just sleeping. Pinned all around her bed were hand-drawn pictures from her grandchildren and jars of wildflowers from the garden. The room was simple, shabby even, but it was overflowing with love. Standing there before the cold body of my little sister, all my arguments about who was right and who was wrong, who was rich and who was poor, they all crumbled to dust. I realized a painful truth. Maggie might have lived a hard life. She might have been broke, but she died rich. She died wrapped in the arms of the people who adored her. And me? I stood there in my expensive coat, with my successful career and my rightness, and I was completely, utterly alone. I had won the world, but I had lost my sister. I cannot bring Maggie back. I cannot change the past, but I can share with you the lessons I bought with my own tears. Please write these down. Lesson number 1. Do you want to be right, or do you want to be happy? For 24 years, I comforted myself by saying I was right about the financial risks. I was logical, and technically, yes, I was right. But let me ask you, what is the point of winning an argument if the prize is loneliness? What is the point of being the smartest person in the room if you are the only one standing there? I won the debate, but I lost my sister. If you are in a conflict with someone you love, ask yourself, is proving my point worth losing this person? Most of the time the answer is no. Lesson number 2. Stop measuring other people's lives with your ruler. I judged Maggie because her house was messy and mine was clean. I thought that made me a better person, but I was a fool. Cleanliness is not morality. Having a tidy house doesn't mean you have a tidy soul. Maggie's house was chaotic, yes, but it was filled with warmth, acceptance, and laughter. My house was perfect, but it was cold. Don't look down on someone just because they choose to live differently than you. Don't judge their job, their spouse, or their messy living room. Maybe, just maybe, they figured out the secret to happiness that you missed. And finally, the most important one, lesson number 3. The one who apologizes first is the bravest. For years I waited for Maggie to call me. I thought, if I call her first, I look weak. I lose. Wrong. Apologizing does not always mean you are wrong and they are right. Apologizing means I value our relationship more than I value my ego. It takes a coward to hold a grudge. It takes a warrior to say, I am sorry. Let's fix this. Be the warrior. Be the bigger person. Don't wait until you are standing at a graveside to realize how small your pride really is. I won the argument at that dinner table 25 years ago. I proved I was right, but I lost the war. I lost a lifetime of memories. I lost the only person who remembered my childhood. Please, listen to this old woman. Family is more important than your ego. Happiness is more important than perfection. Don't let a stupid argument become a lifetime of silence.